And we're back. So, now let's move on to my long swords. I have quite a few. So, we can kind of go in somewhat chronological order. I swear I did not lay them out that way intentionally. But, we will start off with my Hanwei hand and a half. So first off, what is a hand and a half? Well, a hand and a half is a term that isn't necessarily historical in regards to the medieval period, but comes to us from the Victorians trying to classify things. So a hand and a half usually means a bastard sword, I hate that term, is supposed to mean a sword that is small enough that you can use it in one hand very comfortably, with a long enough handle that you can use it in two hands. Now this is just your standard longsword, but longswords were not always all that long. This is a good example of a longsword that is not all that long. Now, this guy is a truck. I call him the Frankenblade because of his unique history. So this was my first ever steel trainer. Not my first steel sword, my first steel trainer. And we got him for Christmas, I think, my third year of training. And from the beginning, his crossguard was rattling a little bit. So my father and I, we ripped off the grip and put a nice elk grip on it. And it was sexy. It was so sexy. And that worked for a long time. And then one day, I was being used as the demo guy, actually. And my sword was being struck repeatedly. And I held it up like this, and the pommel fell off. So there was an issue with the peening, and we had to reconnect it. And we tried a couple ways, and it just never worked. We could never get it to peen correctly. And so then this pommel sat on my desk as a paperweight for about 3 years. And I was always planning to actually take this blade and put it on a basket and make a very wide-bladed basket hilt, because I think that would have looked sexy. But then one day, my father decides, hey, let's put this guy back together. I was like, okay. And so what we did is we slotted them all together, and then if you look closely, you will see if the camera can take it out. You see that little bit there? That is a pin that has gone through the tang and through the wheel pommel. This thing cannot come apart. You could try, but it's not going to come apart. We put this simple wood grip on it. Now, it's a very thick grip, but honestly, with this sword, I don't mind so much. This is the sword that I mostly use for armor practice, if I am using a steel sword, which is very rare. But if I am using a steel sword for armor practice, I use this guy, because he's stiff, and he's not too complicated, he's not too large, or anything like that, and his simple design means that there's nothing that's going to break off or something I care all that much about. I will still occasionally use him in drill or things like that, and I will also wear him on my hip sometimes because he has a scabbard that came with him, which is nice. But this is kind of my pauper's sword, and I like him. I do still have a great deal of affection for him. He's just got a weird history, and he's not very safe to train with. Certainly not safe to spar with unless you're being very, very controlled. So that was my first steel trainer. Let's talk about my first steel sword. My first one was actually this guy. So this one is sharp. This is my Generation 2 Irish longsword. So Generation 2 I don't think does anything anymore. I think they've gone out of business or disappeared or been absorbed by someone else. But they made a nice sword, honestly. They made a very nice sword. So it is definitely a longsword, and it feels really good like a longsword. Now what makes it Irish is it's the hilt design. Irish ring pommel, and then the flared ends of the crossguard, which makes it so that actually doing Liechtenauer type movements with this does not feel all that good. Doing Fiore doesn't feel too bad. Doing English actually feels quite good, but this is a basic cutter, right? It's great for doing the basic cuts really well, and it does have a decent narrow point for a good thrust, but this is definitely a cutting blade. And I like him a lot. I wish I'd cut with him more. He's plenty sharp, but I don't really get the chance to cut with him a whole lot because I do use him on water bottles and things like that, but I haven't gotten to use him against tatami a whole lot. The only complaint I have about this sword, apart from the grip, which is a little strange, so it tapers weirdly, which is nice because I know where my hand needs to go, but it's just a strange grip. I think I'd more prefer a just simple grip. But my only other complaint about this sword is that the pommel can rotate. It's threaded, so you can take the sword apart if you wanted to, which is nice for cleaning, but I'd much prefer if the ring pommel was just one solid piece. I have seen both on historical examples, where it's two pieces put together or it's one piece. Either way is fine, and this one's just this way, but it does cause the pommel to rotate in your hand if you hold onto it, which is nice because it reminds me not to be a dirty pommel gripper, but occasionally it's rather nice to be able to grab your pommel. But this is a very nice sword. I've worn it at parties and things like that, and I do cut with it still, and I enjoy it. It has great tachikaze, so sword wind, and it's a really interesting thing because you don't see a ton of Irish swords around. The only ones that you really see are going to be Albion. They make their, they used to make the Gallo glass. Then you've got the Kern from Arms and Armor, which is so the Gallo glass is a long sword as well, but it's got a much more slender appearance. And then the Kern is a one-handed sword. But that's this guy. And, I forgot to oil him. This is what happens when I clean all my swords. I get into a rhythm, but I also forget to do parts of the rhythm. So I'm, like your average synthesized band. Want to burn on synth music? Just saying. This guy also came with a nice scabbard, nice-ish. I think I want to make a nicer one for him eventually with leather covering it and things like that, but maybe some nice designs. But for now, it does just fine. There we go. Nice and clean. Clean, clean, clean. Okay. So now we'll move on to, why not? Let's stick in the chronological order, because that's fun. My Lichtenauer, or as I call her, Valentine. So yes, I named this sword. And you can go ahead and quote the mountain from Game of Thrones. I will not say it because there might be children watching, but you can go ahead and quote the mountain about people naming their swords. The reason I named this sword is because it was my first, really big purchase. I was super excited about it because the Albion Lichtenauer cost about $500, and this was super high quality sword, and I was with mine, and I was super excited. And when that white Albion box was being carried by the mailman up the hill on Valentine's Day, I ran outside, and he didn't even know it was in the box, but he saw excited 16-year-old me and was like, "Oh man, here it is!" So it was great. It was really, really great. And I think we still have the unboxing video of me getting this guy out. But, so interesting fact, this is not actually the first Valentine. This is the second Valentine. The first one broke, and I am one of the very, very few people who have broken an Albion. So, okay, that's not true. I'm one of the very few people who have broken an Albion doing what I was supposed to be doing with it, right? So, how did it break? Well, we were doing prolonged Zwerkow drills, and I'd been abusing this sword, just using it constantly. We were doing prolonged Zwerkow drills, and then out of nowhere, I felt the weight go away, and I was like, I'm so tired, I've let go of the sword, oh no. I heard something clatter off to the side, I was like, oh god. But then I realized I was still holding the grip. Everything from here up had flown off. The tang had snapped right at the thickest part just underneath the crossguard, and the blade and crossguard had flown off. It was the weirdest thing. It was perhaps a weakness, and the prolonged Zwerkows had brought it out, but fortunately, Albion are really cool dudes, and they have a warranty with their swords. So I just sent it off to them, got a new one back, and she's still holding strong. Her crossguard rattles, which is unfortunate, but nothing has structurally broken. So she's just a little noisy. So is the Lichtenauer a good sword? Yes, absolutely. This sword feels like a sharp, and performs like a sharp. It's a great sword to use, especially against other thicker swords. So we'll come to that in a minute, but the Purple Heart VB Steel Techniques sword that a lot of people have these days is quite thick, and you may be like me and not really enjoy it when it bashes against your fetter. So I like to use this guy when I know I'm going to be working with them. Unfortunately, the Lichtenauer, much like the Marksbrüder, because it's built like a sword, is not allowed in most tournaments. The Marksbrüder occasionally gets in. No one's going to let you fence with the Lichtenauer, which is really unfortunate. People say it's because the edge is too edge-like, or it strikes too hard, and maybe if you're swinging like a truck it will, but I fence safely with it, with my guys, and all it takes is a little bit of common sense, a little bit of gentleness. Doesn't have a ton of flex, don't get me wrong, but, you know, just don't thrust all that hard. It's the person, not the sword, usually. So you're not going to be able to use one of these in tournament, unless it's a small tournament or it's an in-house tournament or something like that. But it is a really good sword for training with. It really, really is. So if you're not interested in tournament, get one of these. Or if you already have a tournament sword, get one of these. I need to oil it. I need to stop walking away from the oil. So you notice I'm not using a ton of oil on these guys either, just a little bit. You don't want to over oil your swords. I know some people that do, and it doesn't harm the sword. It just makes it really awkward to be around because your hands are constantly drippy. That's just weird. There we go. Cool. All right, so chugging along the chronology train. Next, we have my Arms and Armor, no, not Arms and Armor, my Albion Meyer. So this guy. So it was a toss-up when I bought my sword as to which one would I get, the Albion Meyer or the Albion Lichtenauer. I decided to go for the Lichtenauer because I liked how much it felt like a real sword, and I had no interest in fighting in tournament because I wasn't old enough yet. But then, later on, after my other fetter, so we're not going in chronological order anymore, but after my other fetter broke, well, it didn't break, but it was starting to get on in years, I needed a new one. And so I said, all right, I'm going to drop the money on that Meyer that I've always wanted. So this, in my opinion, is the best fetter out there. You know, I know I'm being very opinionated, but it is the best fetter out there in my opinion. It's light, it's lively, it's a great length, it does its job, it's fantastic. The shield is a little pointy. That's probably my only really complaint, is that the shield's a little pointy. But beyond that, it's really quite great. I really like it aesthetically as well because the crossguard is as long as the grip, which gives it that nice sort of balanced look to it. It's a comfortable sword to use in one or two hands, and as you notice, this is the sword I usually use in most of my videos. This is the sword I fence with quite a lot these days, etc., and because of that, she's actually probably the most dirty. So, while I am taking care of this, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about where the Meyer gets its name from and where its design comes from. Because Albion doesn't just pull these out of their rear ends, they base them off of things. So, as we all know, there are two Meyers in the Lichtenauer chronology tree. Not going to say the Lichtenauer Society, but the Lichtenauer tradition. There is Paulus Hector Meyer, M-A-I-R, and there is Joachim Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. Now, Joachim Meyer is a fencing master in his own right. He taught fencing as his main gig and was the head of the Freifechter Guild. Now, he was much later period than most of what I study and have put up on the channel. So I would not describe myself as a Meyerist. Yeah, I'll probably work on it. But Meyer has in his depiction, his guys are fencing with basically these. And actually the image that Albion particularly used for creating this sword it's a guy holding a sword in a cloak, and he's holding this one as his one-handed sword. So they fence with these as their one-handed swords as well, and that's another reason I really like it, is because it's comfortable to use in one hand, which is pretty rare for a long sword, at least a modern made one. Its grip is not too long, but it's long enough to accommodate our heavies. It's just a great sword. Now, who's Paulus Hectormeyer, you might ask? Well, Paulus Hectormeyer is an interesting guy. Was he a fencing master? Maybe, we don't know. But either way, he had an absolute love of reproducing fencing manuals. He liked taking old fencing manuals and reproducing them in super high quality art, and that was his thing. And for that, we are incredibly thankful, because he took a lot of the old Liechtenauer stuff and published it in really, really good quality. I mean, just remarkably good images, because it was now, the Renaissance was in full swing, new art techniques, new printing techniques. The artwork is incredible. However, Paulus Hectormeyer is also not a good person, because the way he paid for that was embezzling money from the city that he worked for. And that's why he was hung as a criminal. So, a lot of the people that we are referencing on a daily basis when we do this particular art are not necessarily the best people. Some are, but quite a few of them are not. But what can you expect from people who their profession is fighting? So it's a bit of a strange one, but that's a very good illustration of how we're glad that he existed, but I'm sure that his neighbors weren't. Man, that has been far too long since I came here. Okay, starting to look pretty decent. Also a note on Paulus Hectormeyer is that he has some strange things in his book. Now when I say strange, I do mean strange, right? He has Peasant Club and Scythe, right? Not as a combination, I'm saying separately. He has Peasant Club, Scythe, Sickle, just strange things that we don't know if he just made it up, or if, the peasants were fighting this way, or perhaps even if it's just bored dudes at the fencing school saying, hey, if I got challenged to a duel with a scythe, what would I do, right? Which, honestly, when you've been fencing as long as these guys had been, and heck, as long as I have, you start thinking about, it's like, okay, if I had to defend myself with a camera stand, what would I use, right? These kinds of ideas. So I think that's probably where it came from. But he has a lot of odd things, and because the art is so well produced, it's actually led to it being part of quite a few memes, because of course HEMA memes are a thing. Alright, put the oil on her. Sweet. Okay. Now, we'll go back to a little bit in time. Let's talk about my first fetter, because that was not my first fetter. My first fetter was this. This is a Chablowski longsword fetter. This is my only sword that was made for me. Well, that's not true either, because I'll be made. It's just a bit of a strange one, because this is kind of my only foreign sword, if you will. This was my first fetter. We were getting ready for, my team, Team VAF, was getting ready for Long Point. It was my second Long Point, because that was me fighting in steel. And I needed a steel. So we all were looking for a good steel sword to use. And I had seen these Chablowski fetters, and I really liked them. They have nice thick edges. Their blades are quite bendy, despite how thick they look. They're very safe to fight with. They're a little heavy, but they're very comfortable in the hand. They're really quite excellent swords. And I was like, yeah, those look great. Let's get those. The only problem is they're all made by Simon Chablowski, who is in Poland, and he does not speak English. I don't think at all. So getting stuff from him is quite difficult. However, fortunately, Jake Norwood lived nearby, and he speaks Polish. And so he was kind of middleman for us, and we got a big group order of these from Poland. And I'll never forget the day it arrived. We all crowded over this huge box that was basically falling apart already, because all the best, boxes that you order from overseas are partially falling apart. Bill opened it up and said, everybody get one that you like, and make sure you choose it well. So for the next hour, all of us were picking up every single sword and going, Because even though they were the same make, every sword feels just a little bit different. And that's something you've got to do, because there's nothing more awkward than having a sword you've liked for years, and then you borrow the exact same model from your buddy, and theirs feels better. It's just a thing, right? Maybe they'll trade. But this one felt great to me, and it was my go-to tournament fetter for the longest time. So the one modification I made is that because I didn't like how much the grip and stuff was rusting, especially the pommel, and we were bluing some other stuff at the school at the same time, we blued the grip and the pommel, and I think it makes this sword look so good. If I ever get another one of these, first thing I'm going to do is blue the grip and the pommel. It has this sort of antiquated look that I really enjoy. Now, why don't you see this on the channel a whole lot? Simple reason is, she finally ran out of gas. The last tournament she was used in was one of my students was using her, borrowing her, and she started taking a set every other exchange, and a significant set that I had to undo. And so I asked her, I actually held her up and asked her, please get him through this tournament. And she did. And after that I said, okay, I'm retiring her. Now, some people will say, use a sword till it breaks. Yeah, you can do that. And you know, probably could spar with this again and it would survive, but it matters a lot more to me in one piece than it would two. So at some point I'm probably going to make something nice to put over the blade to preserve it a little better, but has a nice place on my wall and a good memories. And I can still take it down and swing her around. It's just retired from fencing, and I don't regret that. Okay, we're almost done. We've just got 3 more swords, and they are the most dirty, disgusting swords. And then 2 bucklers. So let's go ahead and talk about the bucklers first. Let's break this up a little bit. So I have 2 bucklers here, one of which does not require cleaning, which is this guy. Now you might say, what is that? The bat buckler? Yes, it is. What this guy is this is a Talhofer buckler. So in Talhofer's images, he shows bucklers that look like this. Some that even have like spikes coming off of them. It's really metal. Now, I got one of these because we needed another buckler for the school, another steel buckler for when people wanted to work with weight, because mine is always up for borrowing. And I was like, okay, let's get a Talhofer buckler, because, you know, why not? And upon sparring with this guy, Talhofer's moves made a lot more sense, because you can do Talhofer's plays with a round buckler, but with this, that slight lip really catches swords. These edges really bind in different ways, and it covers you in different ways. It's very strange feeling compared to when you're used to this. So getting to use it made it a lot more sense. It's almost like using the exact equipment that they show makes their techniques make more sense, but, you know, what do I know? So this, on the other hand, is my OG buckler, and I love him to death, right? This is just I don't even know who makes these, but it's just a simple buckler. Nothing special about it. The only really special thing about them is, one, still got quite some significant dents that I have incurred, and my father wrapped the handle with elk. It actually used to match my my Hanwei hand and a half, so they were a matching pair. This elk is so comfy. I love it. And you'll notice that the Talhofer buckler also had that wrapping, so eventually it'll be nice and smooth like this. This buckler served me very, very well. It's a medium-sized buckler. Originally, because bucklers come usually in 3 sizes. You got the bigger ones, they're about like this. You got medium size, and then you got the really small ones. The first time I ever picked up a buckler, we all got to choose, and I chose a slightly biggish one. And my coach said, everyone always goes for the big ones. And then we learned the moves. I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't need this big of a buckler. And so I went to the smallest one, which basically looked like a breastplate. And I mean breastplate. So, you know, chainmail bikinis out there. But, so I went for a smaller buckler, and I was like, oh, okay, this is all making a lot more sense. This is a lot more convenient. I want to get one of those. And I'll never forget this. When I asked for a buckler as a present, I think it was Christmas or maybe my birthday, my parents got me the medium one because they said the small one was too sissy. You need to get strong. So they got me a bigger size buckler, which is fine because it's worked well for me over the years and I still adore it. This size is about as big as I want a buckler to be. Any bigger than this, it's ridiculous. Smaller than this is just fine, but Bigger than this is ridiculous. The only unfortunate thing about a buckler is that they rust. They absolutely just rust. It is really quite insane. So you've got to keep them well oiled and clean and make sure to scrub them, etc. and all that stuff. All steel bucklers, not necessarily the most common thing you'd see historically, by the way. You will see them. They absolutely existed. But most bucklers are going to be wood with an iron boss, which is right there, and then usually rawhide on the rim. Okay, so we've talked about bucklers. Let's talk about one more shield, one that I don't actually have to clean, and then we'll go into the swords. So last shield, which is this guy. This is my Rotella. I've been really looking forward to doing a video on this. In the moment, we're in the process of painting him, which gives him this awesome blue color. It's going to look even better when we're done. But Rotella is a shield that you strap onto your arm and was commonly used in the Renaissance, both as a dueling weapon and as a battlefield weapon. It's a lot of fun to fight with a shield actually strapped to you. They were steel, and their name comes from the roundness. The battlefield role in the later Renaissance would be that swordsmen would carry these, and their job was to bust up pike walls. So if there's a line of pikes, you send in a line of shields to bust them up, because once they get close, they can't use their pikes anymore. Right? So these were kind of shock troop type guys, roldoleros. And then these guys, of course, fall victim to the guns, and then it's all just sort of rock, paper, scissors when you get into pike and shot warfare. But eventually these start to disappear. But doing Rotella and rapier is a heck of an exercise, because you need to hold your arms out like this, and I worked out to be able to wield this well. I also went to WW with, I didn't have this guy, but we did a lot of hoplite stuff, so I used it like a hoplite shield, and that was so much fun. So Rotellas are really, really cool, especially if you're interested in Greek stuff, because if you're interested in Greek stuff, the best way to do it is to do Bolognese stuff, which is basically a bunch of Renaissance people wanted to cosplay being Hector and Achilles and actually killed each other like it. So it's awesome. Yeah, true story. Okay. Only 3 swords left. And 2 of them are the same, so I can actually just go over one of those guys and then end the video. So, first, this guy. What is this? So first off, this is definitely not my sword. This is actually a sword of one of my students. His name is Dalton. Dalton was unfortunately not able to continue fencing with us because of medical condition, and he was polite enough to leave his gear behind so people could use, including his sword. Dalton is doing well. He's off doing his own thing, so the gear is still up for use. This is a Regnier longsword, which is basically like the most sporty sport fetter you will find. It's a very long sword, which was funny because Dalton was not all that particularly tall. But the reason that Dalton got this sword is because there was a sale on HEMA supplies, and this was the one that was left, which is why he also got the training wheels. I'm sorry, I mean side rings. And so this is quite a thing. So first off, what do I mean when I say training wheels and things like that? Okay. If you have side rings on your sword, I'm not calling you out on it. Just saying that if you're claiming to do Lichtenauer, right, it's a little late period invention to have on your earlier period sword, right? And for a while, side rings were a fad. Everybody had side rings because then they didn't have to guard their hands as much. So that was a bit of a thing, and it got a bit of a stigma, which it doesn't deserve. It's perfectly legitimate. But I find the Regnier longswords to be too long. Based upon my measurement, I mean, I can get away with this guy, but I am not small. So for most people, I find that these are a little bit big. They're all right, though. I mean, Regnier, especially the Regnier Light, which I put on my recommended sword list, is kind of like the cheaper version of the Meyer in feel, so it's quite a good sword. This guy does well enough. If you want to just get a steel fetter for decent price, then a Regnier is gonna be your guy. I don't recommend getting the side rings unless you are studying a tradition that encourages them. In which case, yeah, totally, go get your side rings. You know, you do you, homie. Now you may ask about what's with the green grip. That's because the original grip is wrapped and it's not wrapped very well. So one of my guys, Randy, he wraps all of his grips with green tape because it helps make them stick a little better. And so Dalton asked him to wrap his grip as well. So this guy just kind of hangs out at the school and is used by pretty much everybody when they need it. It's not the most popular sword to use because it's long and the side rings and things like that. But in a pinch, it serves you just fine. Just fine. Cool. At some point, I hope that Dalton will come back and fence with his equipment again. But in the meantime, we carry him on in spirit by wearing his stuff. There we go. That's all clean. Okay, only one sword left. Technically two, but they're the same exact swords, so I won't force you to watch me clean both. So, this is the Purple Heart VB Steel Techniques. So, VB are the makers. I don't know what they stand for, but they make steels for Purple Heart now. This is basically the cheapest steel sword you can get that is worth it. The Steel Techniques sword is meant to be something you can drill with. It's not actually meant for fighting with. I mean, you can. It's not meant for tournament, but people use them for, especially down here in the South. And honestly, they're great. I used to swear up and down that we would never, ever, ever get steel swords just for the school. Then quite a few of my guys got steels, but not enough, and we needed a loaner steel. And this worked out so well, I got a second one. So that kind of fired back in my face, didn't it? But these guys are only about $200, and so for a lot of people, they are really, really good options for just getting a sword. Quite a few of my guys have gone, okay, I'm getting serious. What sword should I get? This is the cheapest one. Okay, and they come back with one the next day, right? It's crazy. Complaints about this sword. Rolled tip, don't like them. In case you don't know why I don't like rolled tips, it's because I honestly feel they punch through things harder. Because of that smaller surface area, when it hits, it just punches and rips. As opposed to a spatulated tip, can physically stab you, it can, but in general, it's not going to punch through in the same way. Especially if you're wearing a gambeson or something. So I'd say rolled tips are less dangerous if you're not wearing clothing. Don't fence naked, but if you are wearing clothing, I find they punch through a little bit easier. Other downside would be the crossguard is particularly soft, so it takes deep gouges very, very easily. And whatever material Purple Heart uses for its pommels rusts really, really quickly down here. I don't know if that is a I live in the swamp thing, or if that is just whatever kind of steel they use. But they rust really quickly. When they first showed up, they were very shiny. Now they legitimately have a patina to them. It almost looks blued level patina, which kind of looks nice, admittedly. But a lot of people get these as their first sword, and should you? If you want to just get into practicing with steel, yes, this is a good place to go. However, if you're looking for something that you can fence with in any tournament, and that will last you a lot longer and not require as much maintenance, I don't actually think this guy is my recommendation. Works great for entry-level stuff, but it is very much a beginner's sword. And it's a great club sword. If you need to, hey, we need to get a loaner steel for the school, get one of these. This is great. It does its job fantastically. But it's turned into a little bit more of a review I knew it was going to be rambly, but I didn't expect I'd review swords quite as much, but oh well, filling the time. But I've got one more of those to clean, and then I'm going to leave all this to dry. But for now, I really appreciate whoever sat through all of this stuff. I hope you've learned a lot about all of the different makes of swords, and there's a lot that I haven't even touched on because I don't own them. If you want to send me money so I can buy swords, just kidding. But
He's not kidding.
I am kidding. But anyway, if there are other types of swords that I may weigh in on, I may make a video. It's like, oh, I found one of these, so I'm going to talk about it, right? But hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of, one, how out of hand your collection will get, and two, you know, kind of the path and course that equipment has taken. Because I haven't really talked about swords on the channel before themselves, right? But otherwise, I really appreciate everyone stopping in. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay home, clean your swords, they need it. Watch out for your light fixtures. We'll talk about some other stuff another time.